All right, let's check in now with retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano. He's also the Vice President for Foreign and Defense Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. James, great to see you again.
Hey, good to be with you.
All right, so do you agree with Congressman Gates there? Did the FBI have some way of animating this? Is it worth even asking that question?
Well, it's certainly worth asking for transparency in the role of law enforcement or the response. We actually have several congressional committees and a Department of Justice investigation ongoing. I actually think that's sufficient. What we should have is them actually telling us what they found out. Now, as to the specific role of the FBI has routinely investigated organizations by either putting agents undercover or much more frequently having an informant telling them. So they're not actually an FBI agent. They're an informant saying this is what's going on. The FBI has, and this is part of the playbook, participated in planning of activities, but the FBI aren't allowed to actually conduct illegal activities. Right? So they may, and indeed they would move to arrest and stop a violent illegal act before it actually happened. So there's a difference between saying the FBI set this up and the FBI was investigating this, and there may have actually been informants or FBI agents present. That's not inconceivable at all. Mm-hmm. The other issue, and maybe the more important one, is if the FBI had ongoing investigations, if they had real-world intel, why wasn't that information operationalized? In other words, why didn't the Capitol Police, the National Guard, even the President of the United States know about this and be able to do things to ensure that this didn't happen? So, for example, if there was operational intelligence, why didn't somebody tell the President of the United States? So when he actually addressed the rally, he could have said, hey, there are people out there who are going to go to the Capitol and do stupid things. Don't follow them. Because I think the president would have done that if somebody told him that there was an active threat like that.
And, we heard that in some of his messages, too, even though they may have come a little bit late. But in those messages, he seemed to understand that there were different types of people there. Obviously, the people who went in, some of the people who were involved in organizing this event. And there were people that just showed up and got swept up. And that includes this 49-year-old grandmother, if you look at the charging documents here. But, 6 months to come to a plea deal on a lone misdemeanor charge, community service, a $500 fine. But, James, if you listen to a lot of people, this was the worst attack on our country since 9/11, or to some others, since the Civil War. But a misdemeanor charge here. And I know there are more serious charges likely to come. Right, sure. But this woman was charged in a similar fashion to a lot of the nearly 500 people that were charged. It's, breaking and entering and being in a place where you're not supposed to be. It's not sedition. It's not insurrection.
Right. So we should parse the two different issues.
Yeah.
People should be equally accountable under the law.
Of course.
And nobody and everybody agrees with that. That's part of public safety. It's part of public order. It's part of equal protection under the law. But what is true is that this administration and the leaders of the U.S. Congress, which are in the same party, have no sense of proportionality in how they have looked at this incident and looked at other political violence and radical activism in this nation in the last year and a half. They have completely ignored BLM and Antifa that have done millions and millions of dollars of damage, ravaged neighborhood, injured thousands of law enforcement officers. They've given it zero attention. The president has purposely obfuscated this issue. Yeah. He stood in front of Congress and said, these people and white supremacists were the number one public threat. And he did that by actually lying about an official Homeland Security assessment, which didn't claim that at all. And he repeatedly only talks about political violence that is not connected with his party. Political violence, which actually isn't connected with any political party, but he does that and he tries to link it and tar it to his political opponents. So this White House is intentionally using the issue of public safety to demonize, attack, investigate, and criminalize their political opponents. And that lack of proportionality and lack of equal protection under the law is a real cancer.
And the only people that don't see, and James, the only people that don't see that it's a real cancer are the deeply entrenched partisans that defend what's happening with this stuff. Both are serious issues. As you indicated, we showed the video of the violence and people attacking the Capitol Hill police officers. But at the same time, you can't be Joe Biden on an international stage and accuse these people of killing the Capitol Hill police officers, which we know isn't the case. There's a lot more to it than that.
I mean, the president even put out a national domestic terrorism strategy, which essentially was a partisan document. If you actually read the nuts and bolts of it, it's basically we're going to do what we always do. But all the framing only names radical groups that the president thinks he can connect to his political opponents so he can demonize them. This is so wrong. It's just like people said we shouldn't, for example, try to claim all the Islamic world are terrorists because they're Islamist terrorist groups. Right. But what they are doing is exactly that. They're saying this violence is part of this political movement, and that's not true. And the irony, of course, is on their side, groups like BLM and Antifa, they are actually endorsed, supported, and pushed on by political forces that are tied to the president.
It's true.
They actually are linked to a political movement, but the supremacist groups and the militias and the other things, there is no political movement in America that claims any affiliation with them.
I know. It's also interesting to look how starkly different Christopher Wray's comments are on domestic violent extremists last year than they were most recently in his most recent testimony. Definitely has the new wrapper of racial, white supremacy being the priority here, even though we know it's much more diverse than that. James Carafano from the Heritage Foundation, great to see you as always. Excellent insight, too, James. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Such an important issue. Thanks for talking about it.
All right, coming up.